We have a huge trade in the NBA today. Was a crazy shakeup, but one that I honestly foresaw coming. I was going to record a video on this tonight, but guess what? I was at work today. Big trade goes down, couldn't get to it live, but here I am covering it now with my trade grades for the Miami Heat and Charlotte Hornets, who, according to Adrian Wojnarowski and also Shams Charania, have made a trade. The Charlotte Hornets are trading Terry Rozier to the Miami Heat for a 2027 first-round pick and Kyle Lowry, sources tell ESPN. Now, if you guys do enjoy the video here today and my breakdown and analysis on it, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more content. And that 2027 first-round pick is lottery protected, and that is a pretty important thing to take note of in this trade for a couple of different reasons. First of all, it's protected in 2027, so the top 14, if Miami somehow bottoms out over the next couple of years, the Hornets would not get that 2027 first, but the pick would then roll over into 2028, where it is then fully unprotected. So there is actually some good upside here for the Hornets in case disaster strikes in Miami, and as Jimmy Butler ages, maybe Bam Adebayo isn't there in a few years. Who knows what will happen? Now, looking at the Heat's track record, Pat Riley's job as a executive in this league, they always do a great job putting together a competitive roster. Spoelstra is under contract for a long time. My guess is there's not as much upside as perceived possible in this trade for the Hornets, but there is still some upside nonetheless. You never know with injuries. Some crazy things can happen in the NBA, so you never say never. Kyle Lowry also goes out in this deal to the Charlotte Hornets. We'll talk about him a little bit later on into this video, but it's an interesting package and one that there's a lot to break down in. So let's jump into it here now with our look at the Miami Heat's perspective around their newly acquired guard, Terry Rozier, who I think looks quite good in that Heat culture Miami Heat jersey down on the graphic. Now, when we dive into it from their actual perspective, why did they make this trade? What are some of the positives of this deal for them? And what do I like about it? First of all, Rozier is having a career year, averaging about 23 points per game, over 6 assists per game. He is having the best season of his career, and a large reason for that was because of LaMelo Ball's absence. LaMelo Ball has missed a ton of time this year with injury. Rozier was able to play with the ball in his hands and really take initiative of the offense there with a pretty young and inexperienced Hornets team. Rozier was really the guy on a night-to-night basis up until LaMelo Ball's return. I actually had the privilege of watching Terry Rozier play last night in Minnesota. He did not play very well at all. But on to greener pastures now with the Miami Heat. And I think that's one thing that's really important here. The Heat don't need Terry Rozier to be the guy like the Hornets were asking him to be, which is why Charlotte is not very good. The difference here now is he is one of the guys in Miami, and I think that is a notable upgrade over Kyle Lowry, who honestly the Miami Heat did a good job capitalizing on his expiring contract. They were able to trade him with just one first-round pick to get Terry Rozier in the building. A couple of things with that protection as well. The Heat technically owe a 2025 first-round pick currently to the Oklahoma City Thunder that has a lottery protection on it as well, so it backs up into 2026. Very similar to the structure of this trade, which is something that is worth noting for future deals that we see the Miami Heat make. But with that being said, there might be a little bit of a tweak to some of those protections. Otherwise, the trade that the Heat technically made today isn't legal, so we're going to have to figure out some of that information and see how those kind of protections are changing or adjusting. Maybe that there's a condition in there depending on the other pick as well. There's a lot of optionality here with how this actually ends up coming to full fruition. Once we have all of the details on that, it'll kind of give us a better picture of what that whole thing looks like. But from the Heat's perspective here, they got a good value deal on a player who is playing very, very well in Rozier, putting up good numbers. He's doing pretty much everything he can. His shot making is there. He gives you a little bit more downhill juice. And yes, he's very small. He's actually very, very little compared to most NBA guards. He is very undersized for the position that he is going to likely fill for the Miami Heat. But I think if you're looking across the league, what coach could maximize a small guard the best? Erik Spoelstra is right at the top of that list. He does a great job mixing in zone defense more than any other coach in the entire NBA. Because of that, you're able to put your guards in spots where they don't get targeted in post-ups as often. They don't get targeted as mismatches on the wing as often against wings. So I think because of that, Rozier his size disadvantage isn't going to be as glaring of an issue in the playoffs as it would be for other teams. And then also Rozier is just not a terrible defender. In fact, he's actually had some moments in his career where he looks like a pretty solid defender. I wouldn't necessarily bet on him to be the guy that you're going to go put on a Jason Tatum or a Jaylen Brown. I still think against the Celtics, you're going to have some tough matchups with Rozier, just given, again, that size component of, hey, Derek White's 6'5". Drew Holiday is a big, strong physical guard, and he's able to punish guys in the post if you allow him to do that. So I think that there's going to be some interesting matchups in the postseason, but when you look at maybe facing off with the New York Knicks, Jalen Brunson's smaller as well, so that's an easier matchup for Rozier size-wise if you want to match him up that way. And again, I think Spoelstra is the guy that is going to maximize that component of the game better than any other coach in the entire NBA. And then the most important thing here, honestly, out of all of them, and part of the reason why I think this deal made so much sense for Miami, is the financial savings component. Miami is into the tax. They're a team that you have to worry about every single dollar. Are they going to want to rack up that tax bill? Well, with this, they actually save a good deal of money, not only against the cap, but in luxury tax savings as well. This deal will save their owner about $15 million. So anytime that you can get a good value deal, improve your roster, get a notable upgrade for a guy who's having a career year, and save money, those are like the four main pieces you want to hit in every single trade. So for that reason, the Miami Heat did very well in this deal, in my opinion. Now let's get to the Charlotte Hornets. And from the Hornets perspective, I think that maybe they could have gotten a little bit more value from Rozier somewhere else if they would have shopped him for a little bit longer. They made this trade a couple of weeks before the trade deadline, which is an interesting thing to note. But they did trade Rozier at a good time. He maximized value. He was playing the best he's ever played in his career. And honestly, with LaMelo Ball coming back, his role on the team was probably going to diminish. Maybe his value was going to diminish a bit as well, just like we saw on Monday night when he played against the Timberwolves. He just wasn't as big of a part of the offense with LaMelo Ball having the basketball in his hands as often as he does. And just quite frankly, the team wasn't going anywhere. The Charlotte Hornets are not any good. They are a terrible team. The team is not well put together. Mitch Kupchak is not the guy for the job, but I think with them selling right now, maybe he can convince the new ownership there in Charlotte to maybe oversee the rebuild, which will be interesting. Usually you don't have a bunch of 70-year-old GMs kind of leading rebuilds. So we'll see what this ends up looking like. We'll see if his job security is there or not. But I do expect Charlotte to be a continued seller. That's something Adrian Wojnarowski tweeted out as well today. And it just makes sense. As I was kind of prepping for a Charlotte Hornets trade guide, this is kind of the direction that I thought made the most sense for them. You know, I've joked in the past about them trading for Zach LaVine or doing something crazy. If we're being honest and realistic, this is the only pathway that makes any sort of sense around LaMelo Ball, Mark Williams, and Brandon Miller there in Charlotte, is to sell off the current pieces. And they've got some options. They've got Kyle Lowry, Gordon Hayward, PJ Washington, Miles Bridges. You also have Nick Richards, James Bouknight, and Ish Smith. So an interesting cast of players. And the one thing I really want to harp on here is tradable expiring contracts. And I've got Kyle Lowry on the graphic. You could also apply that to Gordon Hayward. You've got some players that with big salaries, you're maybe able to go out into the marketplace and eat a negative value contract. The first one that comes to mind, Ben Simmons of the Brooklyn Nets. And I know Hornets fans are going to say, whoa, we don't want Ben Simmons. It's not about actually wanting Ben Simmons. It's about telling Brooklyn, hey, if you guys want some flexibility this offseason, if you want to maybe find a way to open up cap space, let's say they go out and trade Miles or Mikal Bridges and they want to try and retool their team that way. If you take in Ben Simmons' contract, you might get the Nets to give you something. You might be able to get maybe 2 or 3 second-round picks. Maybe you're able to get a first-round pick, some type of protection on it. And listen, Simmons' contract, I know everyone's going to moan and groan in the comment section saying, oh my God, Ben Simmons becomes an expiring contract next season. It's not that bad of a contract currently. Now listen, I'm not saying I would sign him today to a 2-year contract like what he's on, but I would say that, look, going into next season, it's actually not all that bad. And from the Charlotte Hornets perspective, they can definitely swallow in a contract like that if they're able to net value by taking that type of contract in. It's not like you're just signing up for that contract for free, but if it comes with a cost from the other team, it definitely makes some sense to eat some money. Another player that maybe would make some sense for Charlotte is Andrew Wiggins in some type of 3-team deal where the Warriors are making a big buy move. Maybe the Hornets act as that third team taking the salary dump of Andrew Wiggins' contract. I do think that's something that could make some sense. You could also look at maybe like a Rashawn Holmes from the Dallas Mavericks. There's a few options across the league that, teams are always motivated to get off a contract or two. There's pretty much every single team in the league has someone they don't really care about paying or wouldn't want on their roster. Usually the Oklahoma City Thunder do a good job of jumping on that situation and getting the assets there. Now it's Charlotte's turn to jump in and do that by maximizing trading those expiring contracts for multi-year contracts that last a little bit longer. You also look at enhanced future flexibility with additional draft picks. So not only did they get their one pick here from the Miami Heat, that kind of increases their flexibility because now you have an extra tradable first-round pick if at any point someone becomes available that you really want. If you're Charlotte, that you feel like is a perfect fit with LaMelo Ball, you have that asset to go out and trade, which is a great thing to have. But with these other trades, if you're able to get maybe 1 or 2 extra first-round picks, maybe you're able to get 4 or 5, 6 second-rounders, it doesn't sound like a ton, but it actually does really move the needle a lot. Not only does it give you extra stabs in the draft, but it gives you more flexibility in trades, which is a super important thing. We're going to talk about that a little bit more later on here regarding the Miami Heat, and I think that's a really important topic. But the Hornets have a bunch of interesting pieces to trade. PJ Washington, Miles Bridges, 2 younger options that I think are going to have some value around the league. Nick Richards will have a bit of value around the league as well. James Bouknight, pretty much a DNP CD guy every single night right now. He's only played in 10 games this season for the Hornets. He's not a big part of what they are doing, obviously, but he's a former lottery pick. He could be an interesting second draft target for a team that, hey, maybe it takes 1 protected second round pick and you're able to get James Bouknight in your building and see if there's something there that you want to develop. And for the Hornets, you're cutting costs with a guy that just clearly did not work out with your organization, unfortunately. And we'll see what happens with Bouknight and some of these other Hornets. But overall, I think it's an interesting trade, and I give both teams a B+ here. I think it's a pretty fair and balanced trade. I actually probably preferred a little bit more for the Charlotte Hornets. I'm not the biggest Terry Rozier guy myself. I think some of his raw numbers are inflated because of role and obviously the fact that he's on a losing team. I think in Miami, he's probably going to maybe move down the pecking order a bit. He's not going to be scoring 23 points a game next to Hero, Butler, and Adebayo. I think he'll probably settle in around anywhere from about 15 to 17, 18 points a night, which is still good, and that's why I give a B+ grade here for the Miami Heat. I do think they get a good upgrade over Kyle Lowry, just looking at it from an age perspective and a current how are they producing perspective. They got younger and better. That's a huge home run for them, but at a slight opportunity cost. And what do I mean by opportunity cost? Part of the reason we talked about the Miami Heat all offseason long was they had tradable first-round picks. They had assets that they could send out in a deal for someone theoretically like Damian Lillard or theoretically like Donovan Mitchell or Drew Holiday. The Miami Heat have sacrificed that here a bit because with them trading a first-round pick that has a protection going into the following year, they now, even after the 2025 draft is done, cannot trade the 2026 first, 2027 first, 2028 first, or 2029 first because of this one deal. So that is a ton of limitations just from one trade. So that does hurt their opportunity to improve their team in future deals. For Miami to further upgrade, they would likely have to trade a player like Rozier and another pick to go get another guy, which maybe they do. It doesn't condemn them. They're not completely stuck, but they are going to have a little bit of a harder pathway to improving their roster moving forward. But again, they took that big upgrade right now, so you can only hate on that so much. They got better for this season. They're trying to contend, and you can't knock them for that. I give them a B+. Could maybe see that maybe move up to an A- or maybe just a B. I think it's right in that range. And then for the Charlotte Hornets, I gave them a B+ as well. Again, maybe I could toggle that up to an A-, but I'm kind of right in that same range here. They maybe didn't maximize the value fully for Rozier. I think maybe if you waited this thing out a little bit more, a team would have gotten desperate a little bit closer to the deadline and say, hey, we need an upgrade bad. Let's go give a first-round pick and then maybe another protected first-round pick. The Hornets did not get that in this deal, but I still think that they took the right step forward. They needed a shift in their franchise direction. It was completely necessary. To me, Rozier was a non-essential part of their team and their identity moving forward. The Hornets had been really bad for quite a while. LaMelo Ball is really one of the few positives there in that franchise. I like Mark Williams a lot. Brandon Miller's a very good young prospect. Very high on him in his draft class as well. But I still think that you're looking at a situation here where the Hornets are a few years away from really competing. they need extra draft capital and they need more flexibility. And I think they found ways to improve their team, not only right now going forward, like improve their flexibility and improve their team building strategy, but I think they're going to be able to continue to do that with some of those expiring contracts that they still have to work with. Hopefully you guys did enjoy. If you did, make sure to comment down below what you thought about the trade, as well as leaving a like and subscribing to the channel for more content like this. We also have a Discord, link is in the description for that. Make sure to go give us a follow on Twitter. Really appreciate you guys. Thanks so much, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.